Yeah, films. We watched some films. So let's talk about those.
I'm going to take us on a journey. I'm going to be talking for a long time, and I apologize, but I also don't apologize. So, Annihilation, the film, is from 2018. I am dressed as Gina Rodriguez's character in that film because we have the same hair. And though I don't, particularly love her, we do have the same hair, and so I couldn't be Tessa Thompson, and that's fine. But I will say, I was very, very excited by the fact that Gina was there, and the fact that there was two characters that I could feel comfortable, portraying for this episode. So just for that, I was like, this is nice. I was like, this is cool. So the film from 2018 is about a biologist signs up for a dangerous secret expedition into a mysterious zone where the laws of nature don't apply, and is directed by Alex Garland, who also directed Never Let Me Go, Cat, which was that clone film we watched for our clone
I think
episodes.
And Ex Machina.
Yeah, Ex Machina as well. So a lot of those, it's okay. It's those kind of cerebral films where we're exploring what it means to be a person. That seems to really fascinate them. And they do it in a really interesting way. And there's also I saw some reviews where he was saying that he wanted this to be a little more feminine. It's all women who are in this story, and they're really the focal point, and there's some part of that that's important as well, versus something like Ex Machina, which is women using their bodies and men being confused.
Women.
Is she flirting with me? Is her whole existence here to be for me? Sir, no, it's not. Yeah. We should really cover Ex Machina. Anyway, also the book, which I'll talk about, which is from 2014, and it is about a team of 4 women cross the border into an uninhabited area known as Area X, an unspecified coastal location that has been closed to the public for 3 decades. And it is written by Jeff Vandermeer. And the reason I wanted to include both of those descriptions, because they're pretty different. There's obviously, because it's a book and it's a trilogy, there's significantly more information that's going into the book. And there's also different approaches to what it is. In the film, it's called The Shimmer, but it's not called that in the books. So,
gotcha.
Yeah. I read the trilogy for the Southern Reach back to back. I read the first one, I was like, there's more? And so I bought them, even though my partner had one. I bought both of the other ones immediately because I was like, I need it. And I read it back to back, and it was a journey. And it kind of did that thing where I can't entirely decipher what happens in which book specifically. I just know what happened throughout the experience. Yeah. And I, like I said, don't plan on spending too much time on the movie, because for the book, the biologist in it, so that's the protagonist it's kind of the protagonist of the film too, was really fascinating to me, and the way that they saw the worlds and the way that they wrote about the world. I was like, this is so cool. So the other 2 books don't take place in the same way. So I was like, in fact, the second one was grueling. It was horrible. It was so hard to get through. So boring. Don't do it. Third one, fun, because guess what? Biologist is back. Spoilers. Yeah, so since I feel like a lot of people are tuning in because they love the film, because it is super fun and very horror, and I also love the film. I don't want people to think I hate the film. I really enjoy the film as well. I'm going to start in the film world. So the film follows the biologist as well, portrayed by Natalie Portman, as she joins a group of women who travel into the Shimmer. Her husband, Oscar Isaac, already jealous, had been a part of the 11th expedition into this unknown land. And he was missing for a long time before he just found himself at home. And all he remembers is just being there in the house and seeing his wife, a face that he feels like he remembers. And so you're immediately like, this is uncomfortable. What's going on with this fella? And she assumes that he's withholding information due to his work. And clearly there's this point of contention for them because she's already like at a 10 about it. Like, why won't you tell me this? Like, you're
Yeah.
always like, it's one of those married couple things. Like, you're always like this. But then it quickly becomes clear that it's not that he's keeping anything from her. It's just he genuinely does not know.
Yeah.
He has no clue. And that's really scary. But then he immediately gets very sick and they go to get help. And in that time, she ends up finding herself into a secret base where it's revealed to her that he had been in a very hopeless and dangerous mission in the Shimmer, or Area X, which is now this ecological altered world that's cut off from our own by a shimmering force field, which is why it's called the Shimmer. But the film doesn't go too much into details about this place or the barriers specifically. In the book, it's invisible, and you can only enter in very specific areas, or you're just dead. So they find it because these bunnies hop in and find the way in. So it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland-y.
Gotcha.
And so Natalie Portman is told that many people have gone in, but until now, no one has come out until her husband strode out, which is also not true in the book. She volunteers to join this group of women to venture into the unknown alien ecosystem, probably from a place of like wanting to understand what her husband went through, wanting to understand why he would choose to embark on such a stressful mission. Like, it kind of feels like a betrayal. But the group, including actors Tessa Thompson and Gina Rodriguez, are led by a psychologist who is played by the underrated scream queen Jennifer Jason Leigh, who I'd love to do just like a whole episode about. And the psychologist also has ulterior motives, more so in the book. But she's still like, you don't really trust her. She's very cold, and not very comforting for a psychologist. She's just like, the husband's dying. What's the deal with that? And she's like, what do you mean, what's the deal with that? Okay.
Like, why would I know?
In the film, we learn that each of these women are in some way hopeless. And they seem to have taken on this mission because they've got nothing else for themselves, and they need a purpose. And through this journey, they encounter some really, truly horrific beings in nature that are incredibly fascinating and also terrifying because it's like this destroyed and distorted version of reality that actually could occur to some degree. And the group slowly starts piecing together what happened to the expedition before them, as they are being slowly picked off one by one by the things in Area X. Primarily a bear. A bear gets 2 of them.
Yeah.
In the end, we're left with a complete mind trip experience in the lighthouse, which was their intended destination the whole time. And you're still like confused as to why the psychologist wants to go there so bad. And I know why, but it's not in the film.
So it's like weird motivation.
It's so good. Read the book, people. I'm telling you, like the final book and the first book are really great. You have to get through the second one, but like, do you really? I'll just tell you what happens, and then you can read the third one. But you get to see more of the characters, and you get to see the book 4 times. Anyway, in the lighthouse in the film, this is where it already is like kind of off into its own world, different from the book, in that we encounter this alien life form that at first seems to want to hurt the protagonist, but we learn that it's really just trying to communicate. And there is like a being in the book, but it's very different. And so it kind of like at that point it's its own piece of media, it's its own story. And this being is trying to create and replicate and clone, because it's like creating this whole environment, and Natalie Portman is just another part of that environment. Yeah. So like she sees it as being an attack, but it's like that's just because now we see like something coming at us, or like, oh no, you're attacking me. But that's not really what it's trying to do. And then they end up in this really interesting dance, and it kind of breaks down like how we move and who we are. And there's like this whole thing of clones, and then it's like which one it then looks like her, and then it's like which one of them actually leaves the shimmer, and then she has that whole conversation with her husband that's a big question mark, where it's like, are either of them the real person, and does it matter? Because now they're like this cool shimmer version of themselves.
Trauma bond, yay.
Yeah. And while nature has steadily intertwined with the expedition members throughout, warping their fingerprints and insides, nature has also been affected by the humans, and it takes their shape and parts of their DNA, and we see some wild like flowers and things like that have they look like people, which is unsettling, but and I just find it really kind of beautiful and haunting. It's like this weird marriage of nature and humanity, where we're no longer separate but something entirely new and united.
We're not separate now, we just don't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
We're like, that's inconvenient and doesn't benefit capitalism, so we're just going to pretend we are separate. We are not animals. We are not nature. We are humans.
Yeah, and it's not like the environment, anything happening to it is going to severely alter what happens to us. We're different.
Yeah, it's like we're the alien coming here, and this isn't actually our... It's like really ridiculous, honestly, what like capitalism and colonialism has done. We'll talk about it.
We will, and always do. Let me get into the book, because I'm never going to stop. So here's a synopsis of the trilogy, roughly. I'm trying not to give away a lot. So like, even though I'm super geeking out about some of the things that are revealed, I'm not going to say what they are because I want you to read it. So similar to the film, we follow a group of women who journey into an area known as Area X, a land where nature has reclaimed what civilization built. And unlike the film, these women don't have names, and they are reduced simply to their occupations. It's a biologist, an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a surveyor. They're very practical, and the reason why they don't use their names is strategic, because they can't know each other, and that's based on and get too familiar with each other because of what happened to the expedition before them. So there's a lot of other things packed into that, like just removing someone's name, removing their humanity, and kind of reducing them to just the symbol, is also a part of it. But it's also like they need to remain independent in their thought, which is really important in a violent new world like Area X that's trying to morph people and meld them into one. So they're like, we are the thing. But also like, the biologists don't care about that, because I think she's always kind of seen herself as just the biologist. She's just so cool. I love her. So this story is spun over 3 books, and the first one, Annihilation, is told through the point of view of the biologist by way of her field journal, and we know only what she knows about Area X and the others involved. So we start to learn things as she does. We know nothing of the organization in charge, the Southern Reach. The biologist's husband was a part of the 11th expedition, and in the series, we learn that there have been many more than 11 expeditions. There have been several 11th expeditions were labeled that way, so to not alarm folks who were participating, so they wouldn't see how fruitless and futile the past explorations.
Is still a high number of
11 is, but there was a lot of 11. Okay. Like by the time we got to 12, it was like, ow! Why did we even do that? And so like they don't want people to know how numerous and plentiful these explorations had been. And there's a haunting scene where the biologist actually finds in Annihilation, she finds this mountain of journals of previous expeditions, and it becomes very clear that there had been many expeditions. And like it's just like a mountain, like it's a whole room full of them, and it's like one of the more horrific things in this book, considering there's actual like scary monsters in it, or like the fact that you might die. But seeing those journals, it was like, what? And like, what is real? What is reality? What have they been doing? That kind of stuff. The film had diverted really quickly from the plot, really keeping only the themes, feelings, and like phantasmagoric aesthetic from the book. And director Alex Garland had said of his adaptation, he said, "I did an adaptation of my memory of the novel, a slightly odd conceit." So he did not reread the book before adapting it. And though he kept the ecological horrors, much of what I personally appreciate about the novel is missing. So that's why I'm like, you should read. In the book, the group of women travel into Area X, and like the film, they don't remember how they got in, and what happened when they crossed the threshold, how much time had really passed, or how they were able to set up camp. Like they're like, why don't I know what that is? Like, and I can't remember. Like, I'm just here, and that happens in the film as well. You learn why that happens in the book, and it was like it's a really big, shocking point and reveal that I don't think was ever answered in the film. They were just like, how did we get here? And they're like, oh, time's wonky. It's like, it is, but like, that's not why. Anyway, and considering how little control everyone has, there's even more manipulation than what we're seeing on the surface in the book. Like, again, I won't spoil it, but you should know that you can't trust all those who've journeyed alongside the biologist into Area X. Like, we don't know anybody's name. We don't know anybody's history, right? And that kind of comes up in the film too. Like when Gina's character like loses it, and she's like, "You knew your husband was in here. How do you know?" Like, or like she didn't even know who it was. She's like, "Who is this? Why do you know him? He was in the video cutting somebody up. You're a plant. How many of you know that she knew?" That kind of thing. And that's like, because you're out there and you're alone, and it's very scary. The biggest change between the book and the film is the tower, which isn't a tower at all. After the first night spent at the camp, they come across this set of spiraling stairs that descend. So even though the biologist calls it the tower, it's like a tower that goes down. It's a subterranean tower. And she even like remarks, like, I know that's not how that works, but my brain says that is a tower. And at some point, another character, without her saying anything, calls it the tower as well. So this thing wants to be called the tower, and it's going down. So it's already like a twist of like what reality is. But in the tower, this is really like the pivotal point of the book, is there's like this moss that's on the wall, and some of the moss spell out these words. It's like this nonsensical phrase that's really like feels kind of biblical, but it's not, and it doesn't, even in the end, it doesn't make any sense. Where it's like, where lies the strangling fruit? And then it's like this whole thing, and it turns out that it was just Jeff Vandermeer remembered it from a dream, and it really doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have any purpose other than just like, sometimes our minds just kind of put things together and you get fixated on things, and they don't actually need to mean anything. But the writing consists of this plant, like a mold kind of material on the wall, and while the biologist, this is like day one, the biologist is like examining it, it like spits out these like spores, and she inhales them, and they're like she feels this like light going into her, and so that's like the first thing that happens, and you're like, okay, so now we have an unreliable narrator, because we don't know what is real and what isn't real, because she doesn't know what's real and isn't real, and already she is already becoming intertwined with Area X, which is, I think, a really great take that didn't happen. Like people get interactions with Area X in the film, to the point where like Tessa Thompson just becomes a plant, but it's not the same thing as like her getting the spores. And so as readers, we can't entirely trust a biologist because we're unsure what she's experiencing isn't affected by the spores. But we're still like, this is all we can get. So the group encounters similar wildlife and fauna as the film's crew, plants with like human DNA and clones and strange evolutions. This includes a monster that I actually found scarier than even the bear from the film, which is surprising because the bear is very terrifying. And in the book, it's just referred to as the moaning creature. And if I'm being honest, I don't even remember if we ever actually like see it. Like, it doesn't ever come. We just know it's always stalking and lurking
and moaning,
and moaning, and it's terrifying because we don't know what it is, and it's always there. It's always a threat, and that the fact that the biologist is so terrified of whatever it is, like you feel that, like you're in the bushes, like hiding in the tall grass, like with her, and like she's just like, it's coming. It was like some of the most terrifying things, and it didn't even get there, and I was like, I can't. I was like, I have to put this down and watch something fun because it was very scary. There's crocodiles with like human like qualities that may or may not be someone we may have known, and may or may not be a reason for us to return because we think maybe that person that we cared about is now a crocodile. There's the crawler, which is a creature in the tower that is so unlike anything human, but also the only like humanoid thing we encounter. And you do learn as the series goes on who the crawler is, and it's really sad. But the crawler is like the big bad. It's like this, the closest thing to a villain you're gonna get in the first book, besides like the people we shouldn't trust. But it's in the tower, and it's the one that's like writing on the walls, and the one that's like, and it's kind of like what you're experiencing in the film, where it has like that dance and that, and you don't know if it's meaning to harm you, and there's a lot of question marks. So you just like, you're more curious of like, what happened to this thing? What is it? Why is it writing this nonsensical phrase over and over again? Briefly running through the other two, the second book, Authority, follows the character Control. That's like his nickname, and it's kind of going with the theme of no one can have real names. And he's a character who, when I was reading it, I saw him as Oscar Isaac, so this is fun. But he is assigned to clean up the mess left by the previous director of the Southern Reach, which might be someone you know. And in this book, we get to explore the organization that has been sending out these expeditions. And it was not my favorite in the series and was very hard to get through. It's all from Control's point of view, and he was just not interesting to me. Like the parts where he's not in the Southern Reach, when he is like home, or he's like reminiscing about his grandfather or his dad, I was like, this is great. He's like a human. And sometimes even when he just left and was like, he broke into somebody's house to look for something, I was like, now he's cool. But any other time, like the problem is like, he doesn't know what's going on, and he's being manipulated, so you are too, and it's not worth it.
Like since it's from his perspective too, it's like hard because he only unreliable narrator, essentially. Yeah, because and he doesn't even know he's unreliable. And then at the end you find out like, you've been unreliable this whole time. So why did I read this? Yeah. And it's so it felt like forever. And I saw other reviews, people who felt the same way, so I didn't feel alone. But Control is trying really hard to figure out what happened to the last director and what is happening in Area X, because Area X is growing. And they say that in the film too, but it's expanding, and they're like, we don't even know what it is, and we've been sending in expedition and like killing people, no answer. And now it's just, who knows how long it would take, like, to just take over the whole world, and we have no idea. And it's literally threatening the location of where they are, like the actual organization. So if that's gone, who even would know? Like, it's hidden, it's secret, so it's very scary. And this book does have a wild ending, like this that opens up for the third book. That's totally like, that part was worth it, because I was like, what? And there's like, it's like trippy, it is like really scary. And then the third book is Acceptance, which felt more like a fever dream than the first one, but we do learn more about the Shimmer or Area X before it happens. We learn more about Southern Reach a little bit. We also learn what's happening now, where Area X might even exist, and not where you would think. Like in real life, or just in the books?
In the book, like where, like not. So like not like, it never tells you like it's in Florida or something, but it's not here. Like if like in the where people walk and they're in that place, that's not really what it is. Like you think I walk and now I'm over there. I'm not over there. I'm somewhere else now. Okay. So it's kind of like that. And then like time is all timey-wimey and weird. You learn about what happened to Biologist and Control and other characters that we picked up along the way. And it was like, it's really weird. Like it's descending into madness and chaos in like a really exciting way, because you're just like, what? Just give me the answers. And I enjoyed my time with the Lighthouse Keeper, who is very important because they were the person who was there. Because the lighthouse is what gets hit by whatever it is that creates Area X. So that's like the point. The what is it? Is it not zero? Was it like the
Ground Zero?
Yeah, so it's like ground zero for whatever Area X is.
Yeah.
So the Lighthouse Keeper, who, if you know anything about Lighthouse Keepers, it's usually just one person, and they manage the lighthouse, and they just live there.
Yeah.
They make sure it works. They make sure the light's on. And so this one person gets severely affected. And then we also learn about the psychologist and some of the other characters. So it's pretty cool. So again, read it. I'm almost done. I promise. And
You got it, man.
So I wanted to talk about specifically ecological horror in the film and the book, because that's what we're here to do. The inspiration for Annihilation and the Southern Reach trilogy was a 14-mile or 23 kilometers hike through St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge in northwestern Florida. I've never been there, but it sounds nice. The Shimmer is an ecological wonderland. It's fantastical and frightening, and it features ever-evolving plant life, including different species of plants growing from I'm gonna take that back. Featuring ever-evolving plant life, including different species of plants growing from the same stem, which is highly unlikely. Like Natalie Portman remarks about it. I don't even remember what her name was. Lena, I think it was.
Yeah.
It's just Natalie Portman wins the Shimmer. There's animals with bizarre features like flowers on their antlers or bears that mimic the cries of their victims, and that's probably the worst part of this film. And I say, how dare this film be listed as literally any other genre when that scene exists?
Yeah, it's very horror. I was like, I'm sorry, this is rated what? This is not
like
science.
A thriller
it is
or
science
something.
fiction, but or action. Like no. There is a bear screaming like a person.
And it's
and brutal murder as well. So
yeah, and it's like it's half just bone too. Like it's not even full bear. Like it's so scary. And then there's like the writhing, like internal whatevers. There's the fact the person who's like become the moss and the mushrooms on the wall, like spored out. Like that was really scary and also beautiful. It's like, this is
terrifying art.
Terrifying art for sure. It's like Hannibal, which again we're gonna watch on this show someday. And there's even human plants. So like people, like plants that look like people, and then also people who turned into the plants that look like people. So
yeah.
I read that people interpret the film as an analogy for cancer, and Natalie Portman is even discussing cancer at the beginning of the film. So like they, people always do that, and I can see why, because cancer is this invasive species that doesn't care that it's destroying and remaking parts of us into something new. Doesn't know your name and who you are, and that shouldn't happen. It's just doing what it does.
Yeah.
It doesn't communicate with us in a way that we could understand. It's just moving, operating, and accomplishing its tasks without informing us of its plans or hearing us out, and that we would very much like it to not do that.
Yeah.
And so it isn't malicious, like, in that it intends to hurt us. It's simply doing what it's designed to do. And Garland sees humans as the cancer upon the world, and Annihilation as our determination to self-destruct. And so this is why his group of women are all specifically hopeless and lost. In that, like, why else would they come out here? But it's like this alien world of Area X is like cancer. It's an invasive species that is unmaking and remaking our world. However, for Vandermeer, Annihilation is a step further in that it's not necessarily cancer, it's climate change. It's the world adapting to the conditions we've put upon it. In an interview with Weird Fiction, titled Annihilation, Weird Nature Review, Vandermeer explained what prompted this exploration into the phantasmagoric otherworld within our own. And he said, my main focus was with the Southern Reach is twofold: to explore our relationship to nature and to explore how people react when facing what appears to be the utterly unknowable. There's a confluence between these two types of expeditions, and it comes about because to many, nature is the unknown in some way, and for others, unknowable because we think we know it all already when we're actually just on the cusp of beginning to understand. We live on an alien planet filled with incredibly sophisticated organisms that we only partially understand. The fact that we only know now that plants engage in quantum mechanics during photosynthesis, or that sunfish and the albatross have a complex symbiotic relationship, shows that our so-called smartphones and other advanced technology is incredibly dull and primitive next to the diversity and intensity of other life on Earth. And so, whereas a lot of weird science fiction seems to be about nature as this threatening other, I wanted to explore something else, which I found beautiful. I was like, it's so true. Like, it really is just trying to exist without us. And so we're just existing in this way. Like, how would we understand nature? And so there's also this kind of, because Area X is affected by an alien force. Vandermeer has explained in different ways that he believes that if we were to be visited by some alien being, that we would not be able to understand its motives, its effects, or be able to communicate with it. Like, it's absurd to think there would be a humanoid thing that speaks in any way that we could understand. Like, it could just be a blob or a plant or a bacteria. Like, honestly. And in the millions of ways we don't understand the very nature around us now, how could we even fathom understanding an otherworldly being? Nature exists in a fantastical way that is completely separate from our limited experiences of life. And with our selfish points of view, we're missing a valid point that nature doesn't care for us and that it is so much more than us, and it has its own motives and goals. And Vandermeer has also said, all of these thoughts about nature and how if we're going to set ourselves apart from it as if we're not hip deep in it, lead me to the desire to someday edit a weird nature anthology, given that the more we find out about our world, the stranger it appears to be, and more complex. Someday, perhaps, we'll normalize that strangeness in our heads and cherish it. We may even be forced to do so by the circumstances of our own poor stewardship of the planet. We may be forced to imagine the world without human beings on it in order to arrive at a point of view that allows us to continue to live upon it sustainably. If we can acknowledge the Earth doesn't need us, then maybe we can give the Earth the respect that it deserves and that it could end us. You know, like when your mom says, like, I put you into this world, I could take you out. Like, that's Mother Nature. It's like,
they could do that at any point,
I got you to be on two legs and have this whole configuration, and at any point I could be like, no more. This is like Mother, right? And I think that kind of, to me, in my opinion, I think that's missed in the film. In being very overt the way that it is in the series. I think the core of the message is still there, that the Earth is changing and that it doesn't care what we have to say about that. But I think they took which is kind of funny, but I think there's a more human approach, and it's more about the human experience, when I think Vandermeer's intent was to just forget about the human experience. Like humans need to change their experience and that we're going to make you kind of thing. I think in the end, that's the message of all eco-horror or eco-apocalypse media, is that the Earth isn't going to die. She'll keep on keeping on whether we survive or not. And as we continue to make the world increasingly dangerous for ourselves, the Earth adapts and learns to survive on its own. And perhaps one day it will be rid of the pesky parasite that is humanity, and maybe it'll even get some help from another world to do so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Honestly, it's funny because like that's most of my point in our next episode, but not so much in this one. But it's like definitely still very yes. It's like honestly very crazy. and that like people just don't think about it, like the way in which that we have permanently changed the planet, and that we are also susceptible to ecosystems. And if we destroy the ecosystem, it will not be livable for us, no matter how freaking smart we are or how technology driven we are. Like, we are destroying our place where we live, and that impacts everything. Yeah, we don't have more.
A second house. And that's like so many of like the old, like, you know, Technicolor sci-fi films that aren't even dubbed horror but are ones where they're like, we have to leave the Earth to find a different planet to live on because we messed it up. Like, how many Ray Bradbury stories are like that? Like, there's so, like...
Or is that the secret story of what's already happened? Are we actually not from here? Are we the alien?
Also been explored in science fiction before, you know?
Yeah, Battlestar Galactica. It's like the whole
thing.
So
many of us are like, this ain't even it. Yeah, and I think it's entertaining, and I wish people got things from their media the way we do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just the reality of us existing how we do.
True. So
not everyone's doing work, you know? Sometimes they just like stuff, and they're like, all right, that's fine, I guess. But also, like, maybe try a little.
Yeah. Like, listen to us, and then you feel it. Then you learn.